Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Beer Enthusiast. This is episode 31. We've got a style that I'm going to be honest, I think we were kind of maybe dreading having to try like the quintessential like commercial example because we've blind tasted a lot and it's not our favorite one, but we were able to track down something pretty darn close. This is McNair's from North Park Brewing Company. You might not have heard of this one. They're pretty well known for all of their hazy IPA and American IPA styles, but this is kind of in the like Scottish export, kind of realm. They even say on the back that it's an amber ale brewed in the Scottish export 80 shilling style.
There's like a million ways to say it, right? If you're talking BJCP, it's Scottish export, which is just kind of like a regular strength Scottish amber ale. But on this can, they say Scottish amber ale. Then they reference the 80 shilling on the side.
Yeah.
And then we've got BGCP Scottish export. So basically, it's like a Scottish amber ale, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, my buddy Anna Deep got me one of these ridiculous thistle glasses. So I finally have a chance to use it. So we're going to use it.
All right. Nice. Yeah, this is kind of like the classic proper glassware for Scottish beers, and I think it's a little hard to tell, but like that thing is massive.
Yeah,
Like I feel like it looks kind of like a bigger glass, but when you have it in your glassware collection, it's big. It's one of the big boys.
yeah, and it's serious glass. It's not a
Oh yeah.
dainty stem or anything. This has got some serious power to it. But yeah, I don't bust this one out all that often, so I got to for the
Oh yeah.
Scottish beer.
Absolutely. Well, take it away. What did you? Let's talk us through the style, some recipe stuff.
Yeah, well, so Scottish export style beer it's almost the equivalent of, um, it's kind of like a little bit maltier English bitter, like a strong bitter, or you could think of it as maltier, less hoppy version of, say, American amber ale. It's just an amber ale when you kind of get down to brass tacks. Um, the one that Scott was alluding to that is not our particular favorite, although we have had some good examples when we can get it like about as fresh as you can get it in the United States, is Belhaven. Belhaven Scottish Ale would kind of fit in this category. There are a whole range of Scottish beers that are lower ABV than this, that are really hard to get a hold of. But think of this as kind of the regular strength, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5% ABV, malty-leaning amber ale. And they'll just use, kind of a range of pale and specialty, like English crystal style malts. And then usually kind of English noble type hops as well. But it's not bitter enough or like hop flavorful enough for the most part to, for it to matter like a ton what hops that you use. Although I would imagine that there are some real adherents to like EKG or Fuggles, to get that kind of, darker fruit, woodsy kind of character into it. And I have had this beer before, but I haven't had it in a while, so I'm excited to kind of go back and see how it comports to my memory. But um,
Same.
the fact that they reference it as an 80 shilling style ale too, older versions of the BJCP categorize the Scottish strengths by like 60, 70, 80, 90 shilling. And so if a craft brewery in your area calls something like 80 shilling or 90 shilling, and the biggest example from where I'm from is Odell Brewing out of Fort Collins. They want their flagship beer basically is I think they call it 90 shilling, and so those are going to fall into this category too. So if you're watching, maybe somebody near you has a Scottish style amber ale without you even having realized it until you realize, oh, okay, the name, kind of dovetails with that. But it used to be kind of a brew pub type staple, right? Like a lot of old school brew pubs would have a Scottish export, or they'd just call it a Scotch ale. And then they're really just different strengths, right? You can go all the way up to, we talked about the lighter ones, but you can go all the way up to wee heavy strength, which is kind of the Scottish cousin to barley wine, right? You're getting up into 8% and higher ABV in some cases, and just like a nice, sweet, bold sipper. But this should fall somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and they're so closely, related. It's, what you've kind of mentioned is that really the big difference is the ABV range, and that, this is the kind of style that could be made in, what's called a party guile system, where you mash in, and then you have the first wort runnings, which are going to be the strongest. They're going to have the most, concentration of fermentable sugars, and then that would go into one kettle, and that would be your, in this case, what you were talking about, that would be your wee heavy. And then you do the next one, and then maybe depending on where the strength was, it could fall into the, Scottish heavy, which is kind of the kind of second in line, and then the, from the bottom, and then, or you could maybe like do a lower, gravity kind of export, or if you just really wanted to have a ton of it, go to wee heavy, and then just really wanted something light and sessionable, maybe for the, like you said, kind of for the brew pub, where people can just come in and have a bunch of it. That kind of gives you that option to just get a little bit more, maybe even out of your system, out of your grain. You're really trying to get after all the available fermentables when you use a strategy like that.
Yeah, and you could even, it's not uncommon to see this type of style or adjacent styles on cask. So you could
Mm.
have kind of a lower ABV draft or cask version, and then kind of the higher ABV ones you might bottle condition or, um, let mature a little bit longer. But yeah, these kind of American approximations are going to be, should be pretty well carbonated, and I'm about to take a sip. We're about to do some sensory stuff, but I would imagine some American breweries might take a couple extra liberties with hops, which is
Mm.
known to happen. But I don't know. It seems like there's this big turn to tradition as well, right? So
Mm.
people don't want to
Yeah.
overdo it just for the sake of being bombastic Americans. But why don't we dive into some sensory?
Yeah. Beer is crystal clear, and kind of has this like deep amber with kind of like some bronzed orange kind of colors at the edges where the light's kind of hitting it. It's got a pretty nice light tan head, tight bubble structure. Held up for a good amount of time, but has obviously faded now. I've been swirling it a bunch, but I mean, on the nose, I mean, it just screams exactly what Chris was describing. I mean, this is just a malt forward beer. There's like toffee chips. There's um, almost like grape seed. There's uh, gosh, what's that bread that's kind of just got all those? It's like a frozen Ezekiel bread.
Mm.
That sort of thing, kind of like a 7 grain. What are you getting?
Yeah, the first things are all those kind of caramel threads. You say toffee chip, I say, caramel ribbons. There's a little bit of like a lightly sweetened, kind of dessert bread, kind of character to it. It's very fruity as well. Like, and it's hard to tell on first couple passes of aroma whether that's more like malty fruity,
Mm,
because there's some dark fruit. I'm definitely getting kind of like like a rehydrated raisin kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, but there's also maybe a little bit of apple fermentation character, that's kind
Yep.
of playing in and creating a little bit of like a light plum note as well.
Yeah, I
I
get a
would
little
I would say
brown
it's,
apple. Yeah.
yeah, and then even a little bit of brown sugar,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which does that's it's more the suggestion of, because it's brown sugar doesn't smell like all that much, but um, I would say it's fairly equal part. There's a very distant whisper of kind of like a herbal, um, spice
Yeah.
character to me, but it's not part of the show. It's almost dual parts malt and fermentation character to me, fruity, and this whole range of like bready, sweet, crystal malt type characteristics.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, because it's not overtly sweet. It clearly has some bitterness that's supporting it. Um, it's medium bodied, and it's just smooth throughout the entire experience. There's some beers where you get some of these impressions of sweetness, where maybe the body on the mid palate feels like it's going to be, maybe this is like, I think, classic like darker Belgian beers. Like you're just thinking this is going to be fuller bodied, and then you just take a sip, and then you get the dryness, the carbonation, the alcohol, and then all of a sudden you're just like, actually, this isn't really all that sweet at all. But this, from start to finish, it just really, it is what it is, and it says that in spades.
Yeah, there's a little bit of something on the palate that I didn't get in the aroma was, and I get this, we talk about this a lot for Bellhaven. There's something about the combination of that crystal malt sweetness and the hop character that is there that gives me a minty vibe. It's like
Mm-hmm.
minty, slightly menthol. It's like having a really mild chewing gum
Mm-hmm.
uh, character. It's not like chewing on sprig of mints. It's not that minty. It's
Right.
just a little bit of a suggestion of it as kind of a garnish. Um, all those other things that we talked about in the aroma are really what's driving the show. And I'm taken aback by, and you characterized it nicely. It smells like it might be super sweet, or that it might take you for a big ride, and it travels along the whole experience on a really even keel. It starts
Yeah.
off, mildly sweet. It finishes, you, I don't even know what I would call the finish, but it's
Yeah,
not
smooth.
super sweet. Um, Maybe off. It's quite a bit off dry, I guess, but it's not. I don't know. I'm kind
Yeah.
of tripping over my explanation a little bit, but It's not unduly sweet. Is the main point that I was trying to get at.
Right.
You might think with some of these beers that you're left with this like sugary film, and you get those impressions of toffee and things like that, but it doesn't feel like you're dissolving toffee in your mouth.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, this is a very interesting, kind of style to play with for pairing, because this is kind of in that realm that we like, but this is not a style that's going to have kind of this like this residual, or kind of not assertive but perceivable bitterness to kind of potentially play with. So it's leaning. It's one of those things where when you work with really bitter beers, it can be very hard to pair. And the I would argue that the opposite in terms of sweetness, it would not be as bad. But when you're kind of getting into where it's like something is decidedly one way, it starts to create some challenges. But I think it's still going to be something that you can have a lot of success with across lots of different avenues, lots of different cuisines. What did you
Yeah,
come
I
up with
think you're
for
right.
your?
And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna uh, confirm, kind of co-sign what you had said. We love these beers in this like amber to brown spectrum that have a little bit of everything going on. And a lot of the other ones that we've talked about, whether it be like California Common or American Amber Ale or, um, you know, ordinary or strong bitter or something like that, this is going to have less hop character than those. So we're really dealing with a lot of two things: malt complexity and fermentation complexity, and less of the hop uh, flavor and bitterness, which actually could afford us a lot of nice possibilities because we're not going to fall into that bitterness trap that can rear its head in a bunch of settings. So yeah, my the savory thing that I want to pair with for dinner might sound a little atypical, but I want to do Japanese style fried rice. And in particular, kind of like a clone of, I always buy to have a bunch of packs in the fridge, the Trader Joe's Japanese fried rice.
Mm,
And really, the main characteristic characteristic difference of Japanese fried rice is they use a short grain, a little bit stickier, almost sushi style rice. So it's
mm,
less of a dry situation, and then they can be kind of cooked with many different things. But the clone of the Trader Joe's pack that I would use would be edamame, some carrot, a little bit of tofu, and they use a type of seaweed that's not like uh, super funky or briny. It's more like got a little bit of umami flavor. And so, on balance, Japanese fried rice is kind of umami and sweet. There's no capsaicin spice to it. There's no
Mm.
chili in it anywhere, which, so we're going to be doing a little bit more complementing with the sweetness of the beer, plus the sweetness of kind of the sweet leaning version of a savory dish. But it's sweet because it's usually made with a little bit of sake and or mirin, a little bit of like rice wine, and that adds its own kind of like slightly fermented style sweetness. And I think injecting a little bit of this, um, I mean, first of all the caramel toffee type flavors are going to be a great complement to the different rice based sweetness of the dish. Um, and then since it's not spicy, the dish, I'm hoping maybe that there will be a little bit of canceling on some of that sweetness level, and you'll some a little bit more of that hop will rear its head, which could be nice. Um, but sweet and umami, I think I just want to accentuate that more in this context. So, you're getting some of these fruity characteristics that are really going to play off of that seaweed umami character. Carrots and edamame in this context have their own kind of lightly earthy sweetness to them, which I hope would complement the whatever herbal character you're getting out of the hops at the end of the day. So I just wanted to lean into the sweet thing. So yeah, Japanese style fried rice. How about you for brunch, lunch, or dinner?
I definitely went down kind of the more savory route. One of the things that's interesting when you first start learning about pairing, the first thing you learn is that you don't want to complement too much or just be trying to exactly complement. But then I think one of the things you learn once you start experimenting with a lot of things is that I think I would dare to say that I would really only say that really truly applies to like flavor, like when it comes to like overall flavor and like aromatics. I think when you start looking at basic tastes, there's actually certain ones that kind of need a certain level of matching. I think we found that acid is a big one. Sourness from beer and from food, whether to cancel or whether to just kind of meld into one another and creates a nice evenness, and not kind of lifting each other up and making it overtly sour. And I think for me, sweetness is one of those ones where you've just got to have a little bit. If it's that something is one element is just sweet and the other one is just really not sweet, that just becomes extremely difficult to pair with. And so there just needs to be something sort of on par in terms of that sweetness, unless you're going savory, which is going to be helpful. And so I went with Kahlua pork sliders. Where we used to live, there was a place that my wife used to work at, and there was someone who we got to know really well, and he would have parties, and he made the best. I mean, it was like it's fatty, it's rich. You only needed like a Hawaiian roll. I mean, you just needed just a King's Hawaiian roll and that's all you really needed. I would be interested to see how it would look to kind of bring in another small taste element. Maybe some pickled red onion or just a dill pickle of some kind to either draw out the hop character or to, again, just kind of when you're starting to add lots of the different taste together. One of the things is if you can have all of the different, basic tastes in one bite or in one experience, that's, considered to be something that's going to have a good chance at being a very, pleasurable experience. But again, you're just getting this really slow cooked pork and the toffee and the caramel and the bread coming together. I think you can go with as buttery of a bread as you want. I mean, we were talking Bellhaven, and there's definitely a perceivable level of diacetyl in that beer, and so bringing that element into the fold is definitely not outside of the style realm, and would actually be far less kind of perceivable in that way than just having Bellhaven alone would, I think. So you're getting a little bit of that matching there too. Again, I think if it needs a little bit of brightness and the hop character thing isn't working, I think it's an easy pivot to adding some sort of just kind of like pickled vegetable of some kind to bring a little bit of brightness to to the pairing. And like you said at the beginning, like this is, in this, especially this particular example, it's going to be carbonated really well. It's going to have plenty of carbonation to do some cutting because it doesn't have high alcohol, doesn't have bitterness. So that's definitely something to keep into consideration. I mean, especially when a beer like this can come in so many different different ways. It can come in different ABV strengths. It can be on cask, where the volumes of CO2 are going to be a lot lower, therefore, reducing the cutting power. So, a beer that can come in many different forms, it's going to lead you down some different avenues, make you switch out some things, maybe add some things to whatever you're trying to pair. So we kind of say like, oh, well, these are kind of all related and you can get them all from the same mash, basically, there's still some pretty big differences that, play a huge role when it comes to food pairing. So yeah, that's the route I went.
Yeah, I'll get into my dessert here in a second, but I wanted to echo one thing, which is we we pick a specific commercial example of a beer to do for these episodes for, well, primarily our own study purposes, obviously, but also to use it as a springboard to talk about the style more broadly. And so I could not agree with you more just about it helps illustrate how there are no hard and fast rules for beer styles. The information out there for beer style or beer and food pairing that's based just on broad categorization of beer styles, it's not particularly that useful. It can give you some broad template ideas, but even though a lot of beers in this strength range for Scottish style beer are going to taste somewhat similar, when you really drill down, things like there's perceivable diacetyl in every example of Belhaven, but I don't get any diacetyl out of this beer. And so that is a feature of Belhaven, not a bug. And you're gonna maybe pair that beer, which is the same style, with some different foods than this beer. And that's most egregious in other styles of beer that have a much broader range of characters in them than this one. Maybe some of the stuff that's good for any Scottish export is going to be at least somewhat good with this one too. But I just wanted to say that I like to think of it like the beer style can give you some rough ideas about schools of cuisine or whatever that you might be thinking about to pair with it, and broad strokes and templates, but you really have to kind of drill down to the specific style or the specific example of beer before you can kind of untangle whether or not your suggestion is going to work. But yeah, dessert for me, I started with the idea of ube, and I'm sticking to it. Ube is basically purple yam, and they're all across kind of Asia and the Pacific. There are all a ton of different ube concoctions, and I settled on kind of a mashup of the Philippines and Italy, which may sound weird at first glance, but ube panna cotta. I think a panna cotta just from the jump would be really good with this. It's kind of a lighter, kind of creamy custard. Certainly sweet, but not decadently so. This beer has some oomph to it at 5.5%, but it's not such a big beer that you need like an extremely intense dessert for it. And so I think panna cotta as a template. But so we're going to do ube jam panna cotta, and ube's sweetness is like lightly earthy, and then it's lightly sweet. It's got a lot of traditional sweet potato flavors. It's kind of like very lightly earthy, but then you get out of ube specifically maybe hints of coconut or vanilla, especially when you sweeten it up a little bit, and often it'll be lightly sweetened with even a little bit of brown sugar, so it'll give you some of those toasty elements as well. So you have this light, creamy panna cotta with an ube jam in the middle, and I think we're just letting the plum, raisin, toffee all complement the earthy sweetness of the ube, the suggestions of vanilla and coconut without being loaded with vanilla and coconut, and then that creamy panna cotta base is going to dissolve in your mouth, and we've already mentioned a little bit higher carbonation here than maybe some of these versions of this beer in their home country might have. But it is got all the cutting power in the world to just lift that panna cotta for the next sip. So
Yeah.
that's my dessert idea. How about you?
I think that's. I mean, the brewery that I work at, they made a beer with ube, and the big note that they decided to kind of be the playing alongside that note was graham cracker. And so it's
Hmm.
just, and I've had the beer, tried it in sensory, and it's just, I think that I can already just tell that that's gonna work. Like if that just works with alongside a graham cracker flavoring in the beer. I think that sounds like it's gonna be amazing. I went down the French pastry rabbit hole, and there was one that I remembered watching. There's a favorite pastry chef that I like to watch on YouTube. Her name is Claire Saffitz. If you haven't heard of her, make sure to check out her YouTube channel. She's got a ton of videos on there. But I remembered her making it's a really small French pastry, and it's called a cannelle, and it's like I'm trying to find like how big it really is, and I'm finding just like not I'm finding like it's 5 centimeters tall. Like it's a very very small pastry, and it comes with it's supposed to be made in like a very small traditional mold, that you put the batter into. And you really, I mean, it's like the thickest. I mean, the goal is to get like the thickest caramelized crust that you possibly can. So it's like not only like putting tons of butter on the inside and like brushing that on, but then also just sprinkling all the sugar in there. So you just get this real thick butter, sugary crust. And then it's got a vanilla and rum infused interior that's kind of got like cake, the cake kind of still gets in there a little. And then you kind of get to this kind of vanilla custard kind of center. And so hoping that really getting a good, I would really want the rum to really kind of play there. If not, I would want to be doing some sort of like banana infused rum sort of thing to kind of drizzle over it somehow. Kind of a la, kind of
Mm.
like bananas Foster, type thing to kind of get this like caramelized banana, caramelized vanilla custard. Again, kind of these vanilla threads that you're talking about. But really just trying to say, look, like these two things are sweet. And we're just not going to let either one be too sweet, and then it's just going to elevate lots of other things. I think bringing out the apple would be completely ideal in a scenario like that, especially if it's kind of that kind of more ripe kind of apple flavor, and not kind of that more kind of brighter apple skin that you get from some British beers that's even to some people is more like licorice, but really more of this kind of like bruised apple that you can get from this. And then again, like maybe the mint comes and just kind of is like that, kind of just like that little garnish on top, and maybe does something. But again, I think you just have to. It's sometimes it goes against, sometimes it goes against what we think. But when you have something that's sweet, you just need you need sweetness on the other side if you're going to look for some success.
Well, and I think this, I'm having trouble thinking of like a fruit pie or something that would not work with this.
Yeah,
This is just,
exactly.
you bring any like fruit dessert to the show too. I think the way that we leaned into it wasn't directly fruity. We both had kind of like a vanilla custard style idea to anchor a bunch of it. But like this is going to be killer with like any fruit, any pie that's not absurdly decadent, right? If you had like
Yeah.
a triple chocolate fudge cake or whatever, that might bowl this over a little bit. But apple pie, peach pie, this is just going to be like the caramel ribbon through all of those things. Um, and oh man, this would be good with cherry pie.
Yeah.
Um, oof, I'm just
Yeah.
getting
Yeah, cherry pie,
hungry
banana
thinking about it.
cream. Yeah. This is a great kind of, this is a sneaky good dessert beer.
Yeah, and I like that the suggestion of rum as an angle too, because that light minty character you get is almost like this beer doesn't have enough alcohol to have alcohol warming to it, but alcohol does have kind of like a floral flavor to it a lot of times. And rum is like that too, very spirituous, kind of floral, some high alcohol type character. I think that would be a really neat pairing to make it almost like all the fruit character of the beer is the rum soaked version of that fruit.
Mm,
Um, which is a simple idea, but that seems really nice.
awesome. Well, it's great, great beer. Again, like Chris said, if you are now learning that people are brewing this style and they have it near you, it's definitely one to try, because it's not necessarily the most popular right now. And speaking of what styles that aren't popular, and next
Yeah.
week, so yeah, episode 32, Chris got us a doozy, and this is definitely one that if you can't find one that's kind of like the classic one or this particular one, like just find something that's close. But Chris, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to be talking about next time?
Next week, next episode is Theakston Old Peculiar, which is listed in the BJCP as a classic example of old ale. But even the BJCP has a few caveats about that. So let's
Yeah.
think about it as trying to get a hold of this particular beer if you can. It returned to the United States for the first time in over a decade recently, and we were able to order some in cans. So any place that stocks good imports section might have it. So take a look for Theakston Old Peculiar, and they don't call it an old ale themselves, but old is in the name of the beer. So, and peculiar is spelled Peculier. So take a gander if you can find it and drink that one with us. And if I've had that beer, it's been 15 years ago, and I have no memory of it, no particular sense memory of it. I
Yeah.
don't think that Scott has had it in any
Nope.
capacity. So we're going to be going over it the first time. So if you've never had it, let your first time with Old Peculiar be with us as well. So.
For sure. Well,
Well, I think
thanks for
I think we
tuning in,
did
everybody.
deliciously.
I think we did. Yes, I think we did deliciously too.
Yep.
Make sure to
Thanks
like
for
the
joining
channel. Yeah,
us.
make sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. Take us out. Take us
Yeah,
out.
thanks for joining us. Please pick up beers like this from breweries so we can encourage them to keep making them. This is a brewery known for their extremely hoppy styles. They've won a bajillion awards, but I want them to keep making Scottish export
Yeah.
once in a while too. So if your local breweries that are known for something else kind of take the risk to put something old school like this out, please reward that type of behavior and pick some up with your next 4-pack of double IPA as well. But yeah, thank you for joining us. This was a really fun one. Make sure to like the channel, subscribe if you can, leave us a comment. We're always super curious if you think we're full of it, if you think the ideas need some work, or if you just want to pat us on the back too. We really enjoy that. But the more interaction, the better. And join us next week with Theakston Old Peculiar. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.